Hi, hi everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, great. Um, I'm an Anglo-Pole, so I have Polish parents from Warsaw, but I've lived all my life in London, except for 16 years in the US. And it's a real pleasure to be addressing such a large group of entrepreneurs and VCs. So thank you very much for inviting me. Um, so let me start by saying that the official title of my talk, Will ESG Increase My Value, doesn't make much sense to me because, of course, the answer is it depends. What we actually need to know is how to apply ESG principles to reduce risk, to create opportunities, to add value and maximize valuation. And that's what I want to talk about. Just a few more words about my background. As an entrepreneur, I founded an international business development and core firm called Intermatrix some 40 years ago and grew it to have subsidiaries in 15 countries in Asia, Europe, and the US. And after the Berlin Wall came down, we partnered with Central Europe Trusts. That's SET. Some of you may know it. And you're probably all too young to remember, but SET co-managed with AIG the $320 million New Europe Fund. That was the first private equity fund in the region. So that was exciting. And in parallel, I ran an Intermatrix consulting practice focused on working with large international corporates on integrating responsible business practices. That's what the world now calls ESG into core business operations. So I've been actively involved in ESG for longer than most people. I then acted as an independent director on several boards, both listed and unlisted companies, including 7 years with ASECO, Southeast Europe, listed in Warsaw, which some of you will know. And nowadays I'm an entrepreneurial investor. I mentor entrepreneurs. I co-chair a nonprofit, which is focused on helping SMEs in emerging markets combat corruption. And as was introduced, I'm the advisory board of Ocean 14 Capital, which is an impact fund. And I should mention that for 8 years, I chaired an event management software company from startup to exit last year. So, to ESG, it's really nothing new. Successful corporates have been applying ESG principles for a long time. What is new are the major changes in the business environment following the 2008 financial crisis, which has been accelerating over the past 7 years. And now, of course, we've got major added challenges: COVID, spiraling energy and inflation prices, and the war in Ukraine. In the business world, large institutional investors, and this is important for all of us, they've recognized that as part of their fiduciary duty to their investors, they need to act on long-term societal challenges, starting obviously with climate change, but now expanding to a wide range of social and governance issues. So they've added action on these challenges to their criteria for investing in corporates and in funds. Many private equity funds are following the same course, either voluntarily or subject to pressure. And we see more and more shareholder resolutions to pressure investee companies on ESG issues. So many large corporates as well, who are now adding ESG criteria to due diligence and decisions relating to their supply chains and acquisitions. Governments are making legislation on the biggest challenges, including climate change, inclusion, human rights, online harm. They're making all these a priority, and there are new rules and regulations almost every week. Then we have the activists who are using social media and have become more articulate and effective on piling on the pressure. In our industry, the recognition that the huge benefits of disruption caused by tech advances are often accompanied by serious negative consequences. So the big associated risks of reputation damage and more legislation. And finally, and very important, we're seeing major changes in values, especially among younger generation, but also among high net worth individuals and investors. In London, I belong to a thing called the Conduit Club, which has dozens of angel and early stage investor members committed to only investing in companies that meet ESG criteria. So very briefly, what are these ESG factors? You probably know them. E is about conservation of the natural world, includes climate change, air and water pollution, biodiversity, the circular economy, energy efficiency, waste management, and so on. S is about people and communities, including health and safety, data protection and privacy, diversity, human rights, labor standards. And G is about standards for running the company. That includes board composition, share structure, bribery and corruption, cybersecurity, culture of integrity, transparency, reporting, and sanctions compliance. And very important, all these factors apply to your supply chains as well as yourselves, and become more and more significant as you scale your businesses, possibly including through overseas expansion and acquisitions. And experience shows that most behavior risks occur in supply chains and acquisitions. And yet, due diligence on these is usually very weak, which is why people get into trouble. Now, when thinking about what applies to your particular community of SaaS entrepreneurs and VCs, we really need to distinguish the macro from the micro. In the macro, we see large financial institutions, corporates, and governments attempting to save the world. And there's a whole industry of consultants, accountants, lawyers, fund managers, nonprofits trying to define priorities and measure impact. Now, in my opinion, although there obviously has been some progress, the situation is a big mess. There's confusion on metrics, duplication, contradictions, and loads of what I call ESG washing. But in any case, we shouldn't be too concerned. That world is not really for us. We're in the micro world of software SMEs and need to focus on what is material to valuation over the time frame from now to exit. And you'll note that while some of the factors contain risks, actually, there are many more opportunities, some of which you're no doubt taking advantage of already. Under E, not too many risks, but we have to watch out for new legislation on carbon and other environmental matters. And there are issues you know about with crypto and blockchain. Now, I don't know what is happening in legislation in your region, but I do know the EU is increasingly active. Now, there are areas there like energy efficiency, waste management, and so on, which are obviously big opportunities. Under S, obviously, one of the main material factors for this community is data protection and privacy, including issues around facial recognition, data collection, social media marketing, online safety, responsible AI, and bias and discrimination in algorithms. And we can expect more and more controversy and regulations. And there's some key questions here relating to who is responsible, who is liable when things go wrong. Under G, board composition and share structure are especially important. Having an independent director is recommended, if not at seed stage, then secure Series A funding. Dual share class structures are really frowned upon, and watch out for conflicts of interest. A key emphasis is on transparency and reporting. As part of their due diligence, investors will want to review policies and actions on the ESG issues that they regard as material. And so my recommendation is to be proactive, find out what they regard as material, and include such reports, for example, in the data room. Of course, these challenges apply to VC funds as much as to their investee companies. Implementing robust ESG due diligence is fast becoming an imperative to create long-term value and create commercial advantage, not least because an increased number of LPs will demand it before they invest. And on the other hand, VC funds that ignore ESG or adopt a reactive approach risk being caught out by legislation, damaging their reputation, and being ignored by the best LPs. So yesterday, I was at a conference on AI and the metaverse, and I spoke to a private equity fund manager, very successful. He's managed over 300 transactions, and he confirmed this point to me absolutely, that LPs are now demanding the due diligence on ESG. As you know, VC funds have this unique opportunity to accelerate the growth and valuation of companies of the future, not only with capital, but also with guidance throughout scaling. The earlier they make ESG matter in the VC lifecycle, the better prepared their investing companies will be to minimize risks, capitalize on opportunities, meet challenges as they scale, and to maximize valuation at each investment stage. So there's one well-known example I'd like to give to you. Amidst the controversy surrounding Deliveroo, when they misclassified riders as self-employed, you'll remember this. Institutional investors, including Aviva, M&G, and Aberdeen Standard, publicly declared they would not invest. This had a major impact on the bottom line of the many VCs and angels who had funded the company to that point. Now, 10 years ago, it probably wouldn't have mattered as much. But today, it's very, very visible. Most ESG focus to date has been on large corporates and large financial institutions. It's only recently that attention has been given to VCs, but now it's getting a lot of attention. There's a very interesting report by the United Nations PRI, Principles for Responsible Investment, which now has some 4,000 financial institutions as signatories. And this report's called Responsible Investment in Venture Capital. And you may want to look at it. It's got loads of good stuff in there, and you may want to look at it. So that's it, and I leave you with this thought. History shows that companies, large and small, that anticipate changes in the business environment and integrate relevant ESG policies and practices almost always do all the other things in the business well at the same time, such as product development, marketing, HR, and so on, thereby building reputation, creating value, and increasing valuation. So at the end of the day, ESG, it's just about good management. Thank you.